Welcome back to WoundCasters by Wound Care. Today, I'm your host, Felix Boecker, and today we have another amazing guest on the show. It's Isaiah Kaiser from a company you probably have not heard of, Auxilium Health. He's the founder and CEO, and he has some incredible products to tell us about. So, Isaiah, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time out to be on the show. Welcome to WoundCasters. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your company?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Felix. Really happy and honored to be here and have the opportunity to share really what we're working on. So, Auxilium Health is born out of the University of Akron here in Northeast Ohio. I did a PhD there in material science and really spun out the IP that we developed during graduate school. We are currently located in Cleveland, Ohio now, operating out of the Cleveland Clinic. Really this preclinical stage startup, at the core, really developing biomaterials for skin tissue regeneration and skin tissue infection.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I love that you are not a clinician, you're a scientist. So I want to know more about what got you involved with wound care. What got you interested in this space?
I lost you there for a second, Felix. Can you
Oh,
repeat that?
yeah, absolutely. So I love that you're not a clinician, you're a scientist. So I want to know what got you interested in the wound care space.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, um, my family and some of my family members actually have a history with chronic wounds and wound care. Towards the end of my great grandmother's life, we ended up, my family being her caretaker, and really towards um, the end, she developed some pressure ulcers, and some chronic wounds. So we were really close to this problem and the prevalence and the severity, in addition to the fear that these wounds can bring. And even more so, my grandfather developed some wounds as well. So the problem really uh, is close, to me, seeing this, experiencing this, and again, seeing the effect that it has on those who develop these, as well as those who are, taking care of them. So really going through grad school and doing my PhD, again, really my focus was on polymers and actually surface science, and taking into account this and really understanding how material science, polymers, chemistry, and again, surface science plays a role and can play a role in the product development for wound healing was really eye opening for me. So towards the end, I was really looking for opportunities that could really have very meaningful impact. I'd been doing some work with some later stage startups based out in California. And then, the opportunity came along to really look at and evaluate a technology that was, being developed at the university, and seeing the characteristics, seeing the opportunities, and then going out and exploring. I remember really before I even founded the company, I spent a whole summer traveling across the U.S., um, speaking to physicians, nurses, payers, executives, even competitors, to really understand the ecosystem, understand what we're looking for as a market, as the end user, and as really the decision maker, and really putting all of these things together. We really saw a really big opportunity, we founded the company just a few years ago.
Yeah. That's a powerful story to have that personal experience with wound care. Now, not everybody has that personal experience and then has that entrepreneurial spirit to say, I need to do something here. I see a problem and I need to fix it. So, one thing I want to kind of want to know is from your perspective, with the exposure you had with wound care providers, what did they do well and what did they not do well? What is something that we can learn from you as an outsider from our wound care world, uh, to make us better wound clinicians?
Hmm. That's a really good question, and I appreciate that question as well. It really, when we first started to collect data, as I'd say, speaking to individuals, key opinion leaders, really at the onset, we were inspired um, by the want for innovation, but we also were very aware that adoption is very hard, and how some systems are set up. Innovation is really hard. It's hard to innovate, and we saw that pretty early on. And what I really appreciate and seen now is this more research. I think we're understanding more and more every day about physiology, how biofilms are affecting wounds. There's a lot of work into pH now. And I think continuing in this space, being led by a lot of really phenomenal and brilliant physicians and scientists. Um, so when we really started to collect this data, um, we kind of had to look at it, parse this data, and understand, right? Because sometimes you get different feedback, right? And early on we understood that it's complicated. It's very complicated, and there's so many factors upstream and downstream that affect how a wound heals. And dressing or skin substitute or a biologic, whatever it may be, this is just one small component of the story, right, for this patient and for their healing journey. So coming in and really proposing that this is the solution is unrealistic. And really taking into account this holistic view was something that was really good. And speaking to physicians and nurses and whoever it may be, that was really painting this picture was really, really good for us. Um, but again, really this consensus, which I know there's so much effort being put into this now, is really important, especially as we're innovating and driving out new products, to understand what is infection, right? What does this actually mean for a wound? And is this something that everyone agrees on? All the way down to, I know you had a podcast on what to dry, and, how that's evolved, over the years as well. So, I think we see innovation. We see amazing research coming out of really great universities that are driving and improving our understanding. And I think, as we continue to learn, right, this consensus becomes, important, so that, when we're developing products, we are really, really meeting the needs that are clinically relevant. And I think, that's extremely important.
Yeah, and you're right. And this isn't just relevant to wound care. This is really all of medicine. That bench to bedside time frame is incredibly long, and then once it is at the bedside, the adoption, the wider adoption of new technologies can take even longer. So we're definitely at a point where if you think about AI, right? AI has been around for a couple of
Mm.
years now, but we're really only now starting to see some foray into utilizing AI in wound care, which is something that I've been wanting to do for a very long time. I mean, when I first got started into wound care, I was thinking, wow, the company I was with, like, we had such a huge data set on wounds. Why don't we turn that
Mm.
around and use that in predictive models? And the company ultimately started doing that, but that was years ago, and we're still not there. Which is just
Mm.
interesting to me to see the how long it takes to go from bench to bedside and then to wider adoption. It really is a slow process in medicine. But you're a scientist, and I know what polymers are because I have a background in chemistry. But somebody who's listening in might say, "What the heck is a polymer?" So why don't you help us out a little bit on what polymers are and what you're doing with them in wound care?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. So really at the simplest form, right? Polymer is a large molecule, really made of repeating smaller units, which is, called a monomer. And these can be natural or synthetic. And again, that may not really mean a lot to a lot of people, but I think, what's interesting about polymers is, um, they're obviously extremely widely used, and our company focuses a lot on bio-based natural polymers, right? So you can, really look at a slew and a wide variety. I think, one, which is, already widely used is like a collagen, right?
Hmm.
And we know that these are, and have been used, are beneficial to wound healing, in certain contexts. We are not using collagen. We're really looking at other biomaterials. And again, I think what is really unique when we look at these polymers and look at these materials, and their ability to speak to the cells, or their ability to provide cues for cell migration or movement. And I think the movement of the wound, if you will, becomes very important. And a lot of the work that we're doing really revolves around like three main pillars: fluid, cells, and then bacteria. And if we think of like the chemistry and the polymers and their ability to speak, but then the structure itself, whether it's a fiber or a foam or something else, the ability to provide a network and an architecture to allow fluid to move, also becomes, really important. And the benefit of using some of these polymers is, there's a lot of different functionalization that you can do. There's, structures that you can create, based on certain processes. And it really allows for really powerful products and solutions to, be developed.
Yeah. So I had the opportunity previously to listen to your pitch deck. Now others listening into this obviously haven't had that opportunity for the most part. So let's talk more about your product. What have you designed? How does it work? What does it do?
Yeah. Yeah. So, as I mentioned, we're a preclinical stage company really developing biomaterials. These look like a typical matrix scaffold, right, that you'll place on the wound. But really what we're targeting is really like a day zero first application. We know that there's some products that have a certain time frame that needs to elapse before they can be used. But really for us, we want to be this first line of defense, in the sense that, we actually want to heal the wound, very quickly, or support, the healing of the wound as efficiently and quickly as possible. So, we've really developed this bio-based 3D, interconnected hierarchical type structure, with a very unique microstructure that, if you look closely at it, really mimics the ECM, so this, extracellular matrix, and provides a very unique structure, and how it interacts with cells, bacteria, and fluid. So we've really taken this material and the structure and really developed a product line, right? And really looked at this as a platform. And we're really, from the beginning, I've been really interested in biofilms. And again, been really interested in fluid. And then, of course, how does these things play into how the wounds, heal, how cells migrate? Um, so, if we just talk about the biofilm side, um, you know, there's so much amazing research coming out on biofilms. There was I think, some recent work coming out just looking at like slough and wounds and, how this relates to biofilms and the bacterial species that are present. And I think, again, from this, we see it's complicated. There's a lot. It's not just Pseudomonas. It's not just staph. There's other things in here. How does this work together? And again, when we look at these biofilms, understanding how this film forms and then what this does to the wound. And I know there's a lot of studies that have come out, I think even some from the NIH showing like 80% of some of these infections, microbial infections, are related to biofilms, and a lot of these chronic wounds have presence of these biofilms as well. So, of course you can use some antimicrobials in some extent. And I think, the big question that a lot of the industry is asking now is, are these leaching? And I think we've seen a push away from some historic antimicrobials and looking for new opportunities, new materials, new antimicrobials, and even biomaterials that have inherent antimicrobial capabilities. So, but in addition to that, when you think about biofilms, it's really, this phased path that these bacteria, take to where it attaches, it colonizes, it matures, and then it begins to disperse and grow, right? And, as you know much better than I do, a lot of times we're scraping away and debriding, trying to remove the slough or, the potential biofilm that, may or may not be in the wound. So, really what we're doing is creating a material that targets biofilms from the mechanism perspective. So if bacteria needs to attach to form a biofilm, based on our understanding, or it needs to colonize to form a biofilm, what if we prevented the bacteria from colonizing? Or what if we even prevented the bacteria from attaching? And, achieving this really comes back a lot to surface science and adhesion. And that's a lot of the stuff that we're working on, understanding how we can create characteristics from a charge standpoint, from a mechanical standpoint, and then even again from the chemistry standpoint that gives the biofilms a very hard time, and can reduce hopefully that burden to really allow the wound to continue and hopefully progress into proliferation and hopefully into eventually remodeling. So that's really a big focus of ours. But in addition to that, we're also developing products where we take the same platform and make some changes, to the chemistry. To when you place this, there's a colorimetric change according to pH, in the wound. And this is something that we're very excited about because we think, and I think, there's a lot of other, folks in the community that think pH is underrated. And it's been kind of looked past by a lot for a long time. But, it's a really good indicator on, and I think it can be a really good indicator on just the health of the wound, right? Is it, acidic? Is it into the alkaline side, towards higher pHs? And then, we know the wound's probably stalled out. Is there a higher chance of infection now? And again, really the idea from this is, how can we provide data? And I think to your point, AI is such a big opportunity for everyone in every industry. And we just look at medicine, I think there's two sides to it. There's the data and the prediction, or there's the AI and the prediction, then there's the data side. And I think the more complex and more opportunities that we have to collect more data, um, the the more accurate and predictive and strong, these models will become. So, if you're asking me, like, really, what is Auxilium doing? We're developing solutions to both prevent and predict infections and wounds. Again, with the goal to heal these starting from day zero.
Yeah. And your point on pH is well taken. I've been a big proponent of pH in wound care. When I started my wound care journey, I kept actually some of the chemical pH test strips with me, and I checked every wound when I first started. And all the chronic wounds always had an alkaline pH, 8, 9, maybe even 10. And it's something that has always fascinated me. I mean, again, I come at this from my chemistry background. And in my mind, the right chemistry only happens in the right pH environment, right? You set the pH
Mm.
off, and the chemistry just isn't the same anymore. And if you look at all the wound care textbooks, they don't talk about pH at all. We talked about this with Ira Herman as well, who's another PhD scientist in the wound care space. And it's one of those
Mm.
things where I think in the last 5-10 years or so, we're starting to have that conversation, especially with the advent of hypochlorous acid products, where we're really trying to drive the pH into more therapeutic levels in the wound bed.
Mm.
But again, talking about the adoption and how long it takes for the wider adoption to happen, it's still a slow process, and there's still a lot of work to be done. So I'm curious. So you have this color changing dressing that's based on the pH of the wound. What I'm curious about, because this is one thing that I have never been able to clinically ascertain in wounds. If I have a wound and I treat it with, let's say, a hypochlorous acid product to drive the pH into a 5-6 range, where even though that's not true tissue pH, but it's more of a skin
Mm.
pH. How fast, how soon does the pH revert back to that alkaline pH? Do you have any data on that? Like how long does it take for the wound to revert back to its old ways?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, so we haven't done any studies with, like, the hypochlorous acid. I think, there's a lot of really good um, results from this. Again, like a wash and cleaning the wound, etc. But really for us, I think there's two sides to it. One, you can look at the therapeutic side, like you said, to where we're trying to drive the pH to again, a certain value based on what we believe it should be to heal. I think this really goes into the cues. Um, you know, Really, what we're trying to do right now is just capture that real time, instantaneously. So I think um, as again, much better than I do. There's really so many different aspects that need to happen, right, to get a wound moving to where it needs to be. And sometimes it has nothing to do with the product itself, right? It's something else. Again, if the patient's a diabetic, if there's other, underlying conditions that need to be, treated first. So, we don't have any data on, again, if you use a hypochlorous acid, how fast will this revert back? But again, for what we're doing, we're just trying to track this real time to, again, you look at the dressing, you really understand what's going on, really instantaneously. And then, hopefully this will help, again, provide data to you or the caretaker to take some action, and have again more data to make a decision on how to treat.
Yeah, and I think the idea is that with this color changing dressing, you have a visual indicator when the dressing needs to be changed, right? Because the pH now is no longer where we want it to be for the wound beds to have healing happening. The other dressings that I know of that are color changing, like hydrophera or ioplex or any of its derivatives, they're really more designed. They have a dye impregnated in the foam that leaches out, and the foam then just becomes its natural pale white color. It's not really an indication of the pH. It's not really an indication of what's happening in the wound bed. It's just the foam has lost its dye. So I think your approach is fascinating, to have that color change, to have that visual indicator that, hey, this wound is no longer in the state that we need it to be in. So I think the question, right? I think the question now that is on everybody's mind, since you're still in the preclinical phase, how soon are you looking to get into some clinical studies with your product? How far along are you in your development process?
Yeah, that's a good question. And before I answer that, just to touch on the comment about hope this will help inform on when to change the dressing. I think this is really, really important. One of the first people I spoke with before we started the company and founded the company was a young guy around my age. Again, so like mid to probably late 20s. And he told me how he went in for a routine ankle surgery, and after surgery, put a dressing over his incision and said, hey, come back in 7 to 10 days, take a look at it, see how everything's going. And over the span of those 7 to 10 days, he developed staph infection. This really became so bad that he ended up having to have his Achilles, part of his Achilles removed because the infection spread. And then he told me, he's like, Isaiah, I'm, changing the dressing 3 times a day. And, you think about the aspect that, a lot of wound care is outpatient, right? And we're talking so much about home health now. And, again, I'm not an MD, but I'm sure so many patients come back and there's an aspect to where, I didn't do this that you told me to do, but I did this, So there's like, that side of compliance that becomes, really, really difficult. In addition to, just the fear and probably, difficulties with, being at home, your partner or, whoever your caretaker is at the time, needing to change the dressings. So, really hearing the story, of this young man, it was like, wow, this is scary. And about a year after that, I broke my ankle and had to go in for surgery. And after surgery, surgeon put a dressing over my incision and said, hey, Isaiah, come back in 10 days. And again, I'm just out of surgery. I hear this and I'm like, I think I've heard this story before. And I asked, I'm like, why? Why 7 days? Why 10? Why not sooner? Is there anything that I can do? And interestingly, they said that we're finding that if you change the dressing sooner, chances of infection are higher. So really, again, what that tells us is it's complicated, right? And it's not a one size fits all. So we're really trying to provide, again, just a little bit more data to understand, hey, do I need to get on the phone with my caretaker, my physician, say, hey, this is changing colors, overnight, like I'm a little concerned, feeling a little warm, other things are going on. So, that's again, really where we're heading, and really looking and having conversations currently with different hospitals and different partners now, to where hopefully, early 2026, moving into Q2, we're getting ready to do case studies, some IRBs, or other relevant, case studies, because we also understand that capturing these endpoints can be difficult. Talking about biofilms, very difficult. Looking at the colorimetric side. So we are talking and really looking in, looking and pushing towards moving into some of these studies, probably Q2 in 2026, which means, again, with how these timelines and process and getting things to where they need to be. We're really trying to have these conversations now so that we're ready by Q2.
Right. Absolutely. Q2 is going to be here before we know it. It's a blink of an eye. It sounds so long in the moment, but it happens so much faster in the real time. So anybody listening to this who wants to maybe get involved or has opportunities to do clinical studies for you, how can they reach out? How can they connect with you to get in on this?
Yeah, great question. So, I think the easiest way to reach me is my email. So it's Isaiah, my first name, at auxiliumhealth.xyz. Just email me. We also have a form on our website, which is just auxiliumhealth.xyz. And there's a contact form in there that you can reach out. Or just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm on there, active on there. Shoot me a message. Honestly, we've had people reach out every which way. We've had some folks recently reach out just via our website. LinkedIn, I think, is pretty popular for most people as well. But any of those ways would you'd be able to reach me pretty fast.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. This is a question I like to ask, especially to the people like you who have an outsider's perspective, right? Because you're not that clinician, but you have that entrepreneurial spirit. You see problems and you want to fix them. So coming at this from your perspective, what are you most excited about this new wave of products and technology that are coming in the world of wound care? What are you excited about? What gets you going?
Yeah. I love this question. I think when you found a company or trying to innovate, timing and team are extremely important.
Yes.
And oftentimes people think a lot about team and the technology, but I think the timing is perhaps the most critical, because a lot of times that, can drive adoption, being too early or too late. And the research that we're doing in the industry, how, payments and reimbursement, and, there's a lot of talks around this, for certain products. So there's certainly a, shifting and change, happening. And I think, really what that's doing is, for one, it's driving the research to really, continue to look at mechanisms of action, to understand, what's going on behind the products that can, be very, very beneficial. But I think, it's opening the door for more cost-effective solutions that, hopefully can be used earlier on in treatment. And, that's what, I'm really, really excited. I'm really excited about some of these biomaterials that we're working on. And again, our ability to, speak and cue cells as well as also cue bacteria, to react and behave in certain ways, causing cells to migrate. So, I think there's a lot of great work going on looking at, these mechanisms of action, introducing new biomaterials that have inherent antimicrobial mechanisms. And then again, I think we're really feeding in a lot of data, and the ability to leverage all the data that we have, whether it's just images, or others, and I think, as we progress to capturing more biomarkers, outside of just images, I think this is really going to enhance our understanding and our ability to really pick out, these expressions from a gene perspective, and begin to correlate these to products, to understand how we can, develop solutions that speak, to what we need to, again, switch a wound from acute to, or from, chronic to acute, from, again, inflammation to proliferation stage.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's definitely a point well made. Anything else we haven't talked about that you would want the world to know about Auxilium and the stuff that you're doing?
I don't think so. I think, to your point, I mentioned timing and I mentioned team, and, we love getting connected with leaders, in the space. And, when we first started, we were just so inspired by, the voices, that are driving and pushing wound care and wound healing forward. And, we just love to have these conversations. We would love to talk and share more about what we're working on, and figure out a path, to work together. So, I definitely echo, what you said as well, Felix. If, anyone's interested, we'd really, really love to talk more.
Absolutely. So, if anybody listening to this wants to know more about Isaiah's products, wants to get involved with the clinical trials that are coming up, please, please, please reach out to him. He is a fantastic resource and wonderful to work with. But I hope you got something out of this episode, Isaiah. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you really for taking the time to be on the show. It's been an incredible experience watching your company grow for me personally. And I really am looking forward to the clinical trials and seeing how the stuff performs in the real world.
Thank you so much, Felix.
Absolutely. And with all that, thank you again for joining us on WoundCasters by Wound Care today. If there are any particular topics you want to hear about or guests you would like to see on the show, reach out and contact us. If you're listening to this on a podcast app, be sure to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review so others can find this content more easily. And if you liked this particular episode, please share it with a friend. As always, be sure to tune in next time as we explore yet another vital aspect of the challenging and rewarding field of chronic wound care. Ciao.